Okay, so here's the introduction and or thoughts on the importance of the scientific revolution in Western civilization. So, to put it simply, and not a direct definition of the scientific revolution, but to put it simply, it was the time in the 1600s when Western civilization started to seriously look at the world from an evidence-based mindset. The idea that anything we think is true in reality in the world we live in has to be reasoned, logical, has to have a logical reason, and testable. And that if enough tests show that something isn't right in our thinking, we have to reevaluate the thinking. And that would be the basis of what's called the scientific method. Now, this is a unique time in Western civilization. Let's unpack those informations. When we say Western civilization, very quickly we mean the start of roughly the Greeks in Greece, going into the culture of Alexander the Great, going into the Roman culture, and then from the Roman culture going into the Western European culture through the Middle Ages, and then going into the Renaissance, Scientific Reformation, Revolution, the Reformation, and eventually Western Europe spreading out and colonizing places in the world, and the thought and the process that went through that line of culture. And so in that line of culture, which is where we are today, learning about this in the United States, which is one of the current places of Western civilization, in that line of culture, the time where evidence, where reason and observable facts for the first time dominated science and medicine, was during the scientific revolution in Western Europe in the 1500s and 16 and 1700s. Before that, it wasn't. The Greeks had science, the Romans had science, but they based their science on what they thought was a good idea. And if what they saw didn't fit what they thought was a good idea, then they just let it go. And in the Middle Ages, it wasn't about what they saw. Although some revolutionaries started that during the Black Death bubonic plague, where they realized that their theories that couldn't be proven weren't helping during the plague. So it was the scientific revolution that starts the direct line to the current United States math and science. Now, it is incredibly important to understand this is not a unique Western civilization concept. Now, we can argue that some things are unique to Western civilization. There's certain art, and there are certain art in the Renaissance. There are certain techniques in the Renaissance. There are certain thought patterns that are absolutely unique to Western civilization. And coming with the Enlightenment, the ideas of the Enlightenment are mostly unique to Western civilization as practiced in government. But the ideas of the scientific revolution are not unique. In fact, many other cultures throughout civilization were practicing the ideas of the scientific revolution way before Western civilization, and concurrent and concomitantly with Western civilization. So it is incredibly important to note that this is not a unique thing. If anything, it can be argued that Western civilization was slightly behind in the scientific method in this version of math and science. The foundations of Western math and science started from the South Asia, India, for math. China, the Chinese civilization, was doing the scientific method long before, and many hundreds of years before the scientific revolution in Western Europe, the various Muslim golden ages were engaged in science based upon observable, repeatable experiments and observations of nature. So that is incredibly important to note, although we must also note that even though the scientific revolution was not the first to come up with these ideas, it is still the basis of current United States math and science. It was, in Western civilization, the most influential moment that divorces science from religion. In Western civilization and a few other different parts of the world, there is a heavy reliance on the separation of the church and politics, and the church and science, and the church and, to some degree, philosophy. This is the moment in current United States culture where science was removed from religion. And today, in virtually all of the learning in the United States, the scientific method is still the foundation of learning. It is still, quote, the gold standard, although there are very, very notable thinkers and learned people who don't rely on testing, who don't rely on observable facts to promote ideas of the world. Okay, that is something that's out there. But the vast majority of United States Western civilization learning is based on the scientific method. Okay, so a quick overview of what happened in the scientific revolution is this. Many, many, many things were happening in 14, 15, 1600. We'll get into this with the causes and what's going on at the same time, but suffice it to say, there was a lot of money and a lot of thinking, and the Middle Age idea of religion dominating life and thought was going away. And when you have money and curiosity, you get things such as Columbus and Magellan and Vasco da Gama exploring the world. You get things such as Leonardo da Vinci exploring the world with the Renaissance. You get people like Martin Luther renovating and reforming and breaking up the Catholic Church. You get change. Trade, growth, thought change leads to massive cultural change. And we get the change of science, people who have time, people who have money, people who are going to break away from the old traditions of religion as science and bring in new observation and experiment. And eventually, after the scientific revolution by about 100 years, you will get political revolutionaries that reevaluate the class system and the idea of a monarchy and really examine people as individuals and human rights, and it's called the Enlightenment, leading to governments based on democracy. So over these 300 to 400 years, it is a huge time of wealth, of curiosity, of just humans examining human potential and rejecting the old traditional ways of religious knowledge and the ways religion did things and the ways the old kings and queens did things of the Middle Ages. That in itself, in the scientific revolution, is the little part of this entire 300-year transformation of Western civilization that deals with, and this little part deals with the science. It started with where we were in the world, with planets and the sun, and it ends in microbiology, calculus, and it even goes even farther in the next couple hundred years to radioactivity and the atomic theory of the world. And I don't want to say it ends, but it gets to Einstein hundreds of years later, 300 years later, totally re-envisioning a way of looking at the universe. And what they're doing today with quantum and subatomic particles, it is almost too much for the average mind to even comprehend what the scientists of today are doing. And it all really literally starts in Western civilization, remember, during the scientific revolution in the 15 and 1600s.